Welcome, everyone, to episode 5 of the Outsiders View Beyond the Game podcast presented by the boys. You see my hand getting caught off there? That's because we're not together in the same room for the first time of this podcast history and probably for the rest of this podcast history. We are now coming to you live over studio video recording. Key, a little bit of a different setup, huh?
It's a very different setup compared to the last time we've had it. But, times have changed, It's hopefully for the better. We got to, adapt to things. And we're going to hope that we keep pushing out good content for you guys. Hopefully that this new setup is not anything too crazy if it changed for you guys. And we hope you guys like it.
Well, with that, we might as well just get right into it. We're going to start off right away with some football first before we even get into the latest transfer news and whatnot, because there has been a lot going on and a lot of different moves have been made, not just with our team in Arsenal, but also just other teams around the football world. But, of course, also around the football world is the sad, tragic news that happened last week of the passing of Diogo Jota and his brother André Silva in a car accident in Spain. The Portuguese footballers were very young, still had their whole careers ahead of them, but were involved in a car accident just off of a highway in the Spanish suburbs. And, of course, very sad and tragic news hitting the football world for the Liverpool forward, and his brother Andre played in Portugal's second division. And, it's sad for all of us to learn, obviously we're not Liverpool fans, as we've made very clear in the past, but, it's more than just the team. It's about the player. So, when something tragic like this happens, we're all united together. Obviously, he was even more sad. Diogo was just married a little over 2-3 weeks ago. He has children that he leaves behind. So, prayers up with the Jota family and all of them in this hard, tragic time. And, as I say in Liverpool, you'll never walk alone.
When we talk about players like that, especially when they're young, he wasn't even 30 yet, mind you. And a month ago, he was just winning with Portugal, the Nations League. And 2 months ago, he was winning the league with Liverpool. That's how crazy life hits you. And it just shows us how we have to just take life day by day and just always be appreciative with the people that we have. Because you never know when they're going to leave. And he went from, a key guy in Liverpool, and not only that, but just a father, a husband, a son, and now he's just gone just like that. And forget the player that we're even talking about, like just the man by himself. I mean, he was regarded as just a genuine person, one of the nicest people that everybody knew around Liverpool, Portugal. No matter who no matter who you ask, they always say like great things about him. But it's just tough because now he's just gone, and it's tough because his wife just got married. Now she has to live on without her husband, and now her kids also don't have a dad for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's just crazy. And then the parents too, because you can't forget his brother also was in the car crash too. So we can't forget about him as well, because now the parents now have 2 kids that are now gone. And it just is snap of a finger just like that. And it's tragic to see stuff like that, but it happens in sports all the time where we have young athletes come up, and they just die in just tragic ways, and things could be much more avoidable. It was reports that he was advised he wanted to fly, but people told him not to. And who knows, if he took a plane, things could have been different. It could have been avoided. He could still be here to this day, but instead we have to talk about him now not being here no more. So all we have to do is just send prayers and regards and to his family and to his friends. We know that this is a tough time for them, obviously, losing a son or a friend or a husband. Nobody should ever go through something like that under any circumstance.
Diogo Jota is number 20. His jersey number will be immortalized, so our way of saying that his number will be retired. Nobody will ever wear the number 20 for Liverpool again. moving along with that, obviously going into the transfer news that has been going on in other clubs. Of course, we got to talk about Arsenal and their continuous pursuit for not only a striker but also more depth in other areas. Before we even get to the discussion of our striker transfer news with Viktor and Sporting, we have to talk about, obviously, we signed Kepa, a goalkeeper from Chelsea, not too long ago. And there have been ramblings about other players in other different areas coming into Arsenal. Key, what have you been hearing?
Well, I've been hearing that Gyökeres is very interested in moving to us. He wants to move. He actually just he was willing to give up 2 million of his salary in order to move. So it seems like the player does want to come to Arsenal, but Sporting are very reluctant, obviously, because they don't want to lose a star man like him. But before we offered 65 mil to them and immediately got rejected. So all Arsenal fans are hoping is that we get this deal done. We've been talking about signing a striker for the past 3 seasons. We've had this issue for years, ever since Alba and Lacazette left. We just haven't been able to replace them. We just been missing that big presence up top, the guy that could get up there, header, the guy who can clinically finish. I mean, we've tried to replace guys like Alba and Lacazette with Jesus and Havertz, and it hasn't worked out, clearly. And then we've tried to move guys into the striker position like Marino and Trossard, and it just hasn't worked out for us. Evident as to why we've lost the league so many times is because we don't have that big presence up in goal. Now, we're hoping that Gyökeres comes to Arsenal, and we know it's going to be a hefty fee to get him, but we have to pay this type of money for a guy like him. If we want to be serious about winning the league, we're going to have to spend the big bucks in order to get him. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Absolutely. He only wants to go to Arsenal. It seems like he only wants to go to us. He was rumored to go to United for a while, but considering that they have no European football, I expect him to just not want to go. And plus, they've lost a lot of money, so I don't think they have the enough funds to get a guy like Gyökeres. So, and he's in the prime of his career, so why not move to England and to move to a club like Arsenal, who are just this close to getting their hands on the Premier League? We've seen how close we've gotten without a striker. If we can get a striker like Gyökeres' skill set, I think we have a really good chance of winning the league. That's the same thing for everybody that is in the Premier League. Everybody believes they have a chance of winning it. But, I mean, the squad that we have right now, with guys like Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, Madueke possibly coming in, Trossard being at this club, he's going to have a lot of freedom, and it's going to open up a lot of space for guys like Saka and Odegaard. So I truly believe that with the players that we have in the system already, bringing in somebody like Gyökeres is going to definitely help us in our push for a title.
Yeah, no doubt. Just for some context, Viktor Gyökeres, the 27-year-old, I believe, 27-year-old Swedish forward, currently plays for Sporting in Portugal. He does have a history of playing in England, played for Brighton, never played specifically for Brighton. He never appeared for them. But during his time with Brighton, he did go on loan to places like St. Pauli, Swansea City, and Coventry City, where he would later transfer to in 2021. He spent 3 years with Coventry until 2023 when he transferred to Sporting. But during his time with Coventry, he had 91 appearances and 38 goals. But then all of a sudden, you change to his time with Sporting. Sporting, obviously, he hasn't been with as long, but Sporting, he's only had 66 appearances. But in those 66 appearances, he has had 68 goals for Sporting, compared to the 38 goals he had in 91 appearances with Coventry. So, just that alone shows his development, how much he's, going crazy as a player. And obviously, fairly underrated, I might add. But, at the same time, you bring a guy like that, not just to Arsenal, but to the Premier League, in the form that he's in right now. Not only is that going to help Arsenal, but it's also going to help him as a player and grow his brand as, he is going to be the guy to beat this is the type of guy that you want to see compete with big strikers like Erling Haaland. So, at the end of the day, obviously for us this is great because it helps Arsenal, but I think he's also thinking in the back of my mind of, oh, not only do I get to play in the Premier League for Arsenal, but I get to play in a much bigger market where, I could truly show my skills. Because, at the end of the day, you look at his highlights and stuff like that, when you look at his highlights, if you look at the fine print of it, you're not really looking at highlights of him playing against these other Portuguese teams in Liga Portugal. You're seeing his highlights from his games in the Champions League with Sporting, which is obviously the bigger market. So, now that he's coming to the Premier League, I think he knows that he's going to have a lot more to work with. Will this be the piece that pushes Arsenal to first? We don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. But,
We do not know. We've said that for the
yeah.
past few years, and he would
And
always
it's
come in
like you said,
second.
like we've been saying though, it seems like every single time we bring a new piece into it, we're saying this is going to be the piece that gets us over the line. Whether it's Havertz, Raya, whoever that we bring in, Moreno. At the end of the day, it's you won't know until you know. What will be the telltale is how the season starts. Beginning the season with a really rough schedule to start the beginning of the season. Our first couple of games are, needless to say, probably the toughest start we could have to a Premier League season. At the end of the day, all we can hope for as fans of teams who don't get relegated very often, we don't have another season where the three who came up go back down, because obviously we've seen that trend over the last couple of seasons. This past season, it was Southampton, Ipswich,
Ipswich.
and Leeds. Not Leeds, Leicester. And then who were the three to come up last season? Those same three. So, and now the three that we see coming up is obviously Burnley, and then Sunderland won the promotional playoff, and then of course Leeds as well are also coming back up. So those are teams who have had Premier League success recently. I mean, I wouldn't say success, but have been in the Premier League recently, at least within the last couple of years. Uh, so,
Sunderland
but
hasn't been in a while, so I would
yeah,
really hope for them to stay up. But you know,
and it's great. It's great to see that that we're going to be seeing that derby again in the Premier League between Newcastle and Sunderland, because that is
that's
one of
gonna
the
be a great
biggest
derby.
derbies in English football. So just be able to see it twice a year now, once in St James's, once in the Stadium of Light, is a great thing to look forward to. I know personally I'm going to be looking forward to that.
I'm gonna look forward to it as well. But I just hope they don't. None of the teams that got promoted get relegated. We're sick and tired of seeing it every single year. We have to keep seeing teams go up and down, up and down. It's just annoying. I feel like that's also on kind of the Premier League because they're not giving these teams enough money. I wouldn't even say that. I feel like the teams just don't have enough money to really
Yeah.
hold their own, and they're selling a lot of their top guys. I mean, we just seen Sunderland; they just sold Job to Borussia Dortmund. He was a key guy to the promotion playoff and to getting Sunderland to the Premier League. So it's like it's hard for these teams to keep hold of their star players because they want to move to bigger clubs. It's tough, and this is what I mean, right here. I mean, we haven't seen the Newcastle and Sunderland derby in a minute, but obviously, Newcastle's gonna win. You look at the quality. The quality that they have is just It's just a big
hmm
skill difference between both teams, and
Yeah, but you can say that, just to, not to mean to cut you off. You can say that, but in these big derbies like this, anything can happen. I mean,
of course, of
look
course,
at the Merseyside derby. What we've seen from that over the last couple of years. Obviously, Everton is Premier League quality, and arguably much better than Sunderland in a case. But look at what happened this last season. Obviously, technically, the last Merseyside derbies happened this past season, and Everton came back with a draw at Goodison, and then they had a good showing as well at Anfield. But you know, that's the thing about these derby games. Anything can happen. So obviously the first game between these two for this Premier League this season, obviously as you can see, isn't until December. So we're gonna have to see where the two teams stand at that point in the season. But that first game is at Sunderland. It's at the Stadium of Light, and then they face not too long after that in March in Newcastle. So you just said, obviously Newcastle is a much better team statistically and visibly, yes, but we won't really know this if how this game could go until one, we get to that point in the season, and two, when the game's actually played. How bad do these teams actually want to beat each other? Because at that point, it's not going to be about the Premier League. At that point, it's going to be about beating the other side because of the amount of history that's between these two. And we already know that the stadiums, both St. James's and Light, are going to be packed and rowdy. As for those of you if you look up the highlights of that FA Cup third round match between the two, even though it was a blowout in Newcastle's favor and it was at the Stadium of Light, I'm sure it was just as crazy.
If nobody has been keeping up, the Club World Cup has been going in full effect during the summer, and it's been a great tournament to say the least. A lot of surprises with a lot of people. With how well the Brazilian teams have been doing. They have been going crazy on teams in Europe. You have Fluminense, who are right now in the semifinals. They actually play today around 3 o'clock against Chelsea. And that's going to be a match. I mean, a lot of people have been overlooking teams from the Brazilian league, but this is not surprising. Palmeiras was also in it, and they finished top of their group. This is not surprising from these teams. It's always been over the years that they've had success. It just does not have enough recognition because of the TV that plays during the Brazilian league. You also have Botafogo, Palmeiras, and Fluminense, all three teams that made the knockout rounds, which nobody expected them to even get past the group stage and to go into the knockouts. It's a surprise to everybody, but it just shows how good the Brazilian leagues are when it comes to football. Over the, not even decades, I would even say like over a century has been like this. Ever since Pele, the Brazilian league has shown time and time again that they are a solid league and that they have the quality to compete with these teams. And there's no excuse now to say, oh, well, no Brazilian team could beat a team like PSG or Real Madrid, because it's happened. It's happened numerous times over and over again. They've proven that just because that they don't have, the big names like Messi, Ronaldo, Luis Suarez, Lewandowski, Bellingham, Haaland, doesn't matter. They can still compete with any team on a daily basis.
But yeah, like I was saying, so the obviously the market and stuff like that is going to be a little different being where we are. But I think FIFA needs to also look at this as like how most of us have been looking at it, as the Club World Cup. Obviously, it's its own competition, but people may not realize that Club World Cup is kind of a trial run for what the FIFA actual World Cup is going to look like next year. Now, it's going to be different. It's going to be different crowds because obviously we're talking about the national teams here. And even with, like you said, some of these Brazilian teams, some of these South American teams that were in the Club World Cup, their fans were coming out in numbers too. They were coming out to New York area or wherever else they were playing, in Atlanta, LA, whatnot. So, they were still showing out in other places. I guess it's just the number of them that's a little different. But, with the club, with the actual World Cup, we're talking about the actual nation's fans. We're talking hundreds more fans for these people. Obviously, the U.S., and then, of course, surrounding Canada's fans, Mexico, and then obviously all the other teams. And now that the World Cup itself is going to be expanded this year, this is a lot more nations coming into this. So I'm not worried as to what the World Cup's going to look like next year. I don't think it's going to be the same thing as where the stands are not as full and whatnot. I'm not worried about that just because of the sheer fact that it's a completely different type of competition. Let's take Qatar for example, right? The Qatar World Cup. The fans showed up in numbers for all things. Everybody was out there. But, Qatar is not a huge market. They only just built those stadiums. There's not a whole lot of people out there. And you could have argued that the problem Qatar would have had was that they wouldn't have had enough people coming out because it's in the Middle East, because it's far, because there's not a whole lot of people that live there in general, or at least around where the stadium's at. But, they showed out and it ended up being one of the best World Cups to date. So, you know, is this World Cup going to top that? We're going to have to wait and see. But I'm not worried about attendance and stuff like that for the actual World Cup come next summer. I'm going to be interested to see how it plays out. I'm going to be interested to see how the actual competition plays out. But as far as the environment's concerned and the amount of people that are out there, I'm not worried about that. But also another big reason as to why the numbers were so low this year is obviously probably what's going to be the bigger concern next year is not necessarily about interest in sport. I think it's going to be about safety and security, because one of
Definitely.
the big head
100%.
one of the big headlines for this Club World Cup was obviously the immigration situation. They were saying that they were going to be placing border ICE agents and whatnot at these games for safety and security purposes, but at the end of the day their job is to for collect and deport. And we're talking about a lot of fans from outside the country, a lot of fans who live in the country who are from outside the country coming to these games to support their home teams. And the reason why a lot of these stadiums were not more packed out than they were was because of fear that they would get swept up by these agents due to the new immigration policies. Now, we don't like to get political here, and I'm not going to. Not to say the things that are going on are wrong, but
No.
at the same breath, this is the reason why, or it's one big reason why the attendance was what it was. And I think Gianni Infantino knows that, the FIFA president. He knows that. And I think he's
Definitely does.
trying to work with local governments to try and, resolve this and to see what it's going to look like for the next year for the World Cup, and as are the other neighboring nations, Canada and Mexico. I think they're also trying to work with the United States to make this a better experience for all. So there was calls at the beginning of the Club World Cup for FIFA to take the U.S. out of the World Cup and just make it in Canada and Mexico, and just grant Canada with more matches. The Canadian government has been saying that they are willing to open the doors to other stadiums in their country to allow for more games to be played in Canada in places like Vancouver, Alberta, um, you know, Ottawa. So I think FIFA has that in the back of their mind, but in the same breath, I don't think it will happen, nor can it, because the majority of games will be played in the U.S. That's just a sheer fact, and especially the fact that they're growing it for more teams, it would just be logistically impossible to take the U.S. out of it.
Yeah, 100% will just be difficult. Uh, the U.S. is just it has a much more bigger market with the stadiums, and it's much more easier for FIFA probably to just get these stadiums done and dusted with. There's not a lot of there's also stadiums in Mexico. We got to think of that as well. Not only with Canada and the U.S., but Mexico also has a very big market when it comes to football. But like you said before, I mean, the people are just going to be scared to just come to the U.S. because they don't want to get caught. And it's unfortunate because we're not going to be able to see the atmosphere that they bring into the World Cup, because the fans are what makes the games. They usually make the atmosphere. They make the intensity so much. We're not going to get that the rivalry that we want when it comes to the fans. But it's unfortunate, and these things happen. We can't always get what we want. And I feel like FIFA knows that. And they, like you said, they tested this out with the Club World Cup just to see how well it would do. And the fans, I mean, I would say they did pretty good. Everything worked out all right. But when it comes to the World Cup, it's going to be a much more bigger scene, because obviously it's going to be on U.S. soil for most of the time, and the final it's also going to be in the U.S. So of course the U.S. is going to take a lot of precaution into that. But I just don't even care about all of that, because screw the immigration, the process. Why let the fans come in and let them support their country, let them support the people that they see on TV daily, day in and day out, because these guys, they work hard to get to this position of playing in the World Cup one day and holding that prestigious trophy. Let the fans come in, you know whatever, if things happen, which is, it's gonna happen, terrible things, we don't want nothing to happen, but no matter what, there's always something bound to happen because of somebody. But we know that the fans deserve it. Everybody knows that the fans deserve to come in to the country and deserve to watch their team play. I mean, like Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan just made their World Cup, their first major tournament. And the fans probably can't travel because of the whole process. It's not fair to them because they have been waiting probably all their lifetime to see their team possibly make the World Cup and do something. But hey, if they can't make it, they've always got on the television and stuff like that to watch the games. But it won't be the same as in going in real life, in person, to watch your team actually play. So it's unfortunate circumstances, and you will hope that things do change. It's only a year away, so anything could happen in a year. We still got a lot of more time until the World Cup actually happens. But considering with how all of the process has been going on, I just don't know if anything's going to be resolved for this to really get more people into going into the World Cup.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, the fans should be able to come to these stadiums and come to these games without the fear of them, being sent away. So, it's an unfortunate situation, and needless to say, there's a lot of work that needs to be done by a lot of parties to get everything ready for next summer for the World Cup. Um, you know, Obviously, as much as we'd like to come out to those games, and it's really tough considering we live like 20, 30 minutes from the final stadium.
Man, those
Um,
tickets are going to be expensive to even get,
yeah.
and then you got to consider traveling. I mean,
Hmm.
the traffic is going to be a pain. It's going to be a pain in the neck going into those games, man, because you have all the fans coming in at once. You don't know who you're going to run into. You don't know how
Yeah.
long the wait's going to be. It's going to be nuts during that
But
time,
it's
but
but
it's going
it's
to be
it's
worth it.
so yeah, it would be worth it, and it's just so tough knowing that and this is my thought process in it. I live where I'm at right now. I've lived here my entire life. I've never left here. Well, I mean, I go to school in South Carolina, but besides that, I have never left here, right? MetLife Stadium is maybe 20 to 30 minutes away over the bridge, two exits up the turnpike, right? Two, three exits up the turnpike. If you think for a second that I'm not going to attend at least one game, one World Cup game at a stadium that is around the corner from me, essentially, you're crazy. I don't care what I have to spend on it. I don't even care if it's not the final. The fact remains, the World Cup. Some of the greatest players out in our country, in the nation, or in the world right now, are going to be playing just over the bridge. You don't think for a second I'm not going to be there? You've lost it.
Here's a topic that is not UFC related. Well, as speaking on that with the whole finding out news after we finish recording, Mike Brown is officially the newest coach of the New York Knicks. And just to say the least, a lot of Knicks fans are very happy about it. And to sum it up, I am happy for them. It's a good pickup. Mike Brown is a solid coach, two-time coach of the year. He's been in stints with teams like Cleveland and also the recently the Sacramento Kings.
Hmm.
And he's a coach that actually does something that Tibbs has never done, which is use his rotation, and he uses a deep rotation. Now how do I see the coaching panning out? I think it will do good. Um, Obviously the team that he has right now, it's gonna work out. You just signed Jordan Clarkson and Yabusele, who are gonna be two key pieces into your bench, which was, like we said, a big issue with the Knicks playoff run last year is that they didn't have a deep enough bench. But that's also because of Tibbs not implementing that.
Yeah.
But hey, Mike Brown is a solid coach that could get guys that is gonna get Brunson. the ball, is going to open this team up with the shooters that they have as well, whether it's in the lineup, starting, or off the bench. He's going to implement it, and he's going to get the team working with, I feel like, also, like, them signing Mike Brown was a little surprised because I figured they would go for Mike Malone.
Yeah,
Uh,
there was a lot
More
of
like a,
talks around him. Yeah,
I
there was
figured
a
they would.
lot. Yeah, there was a lot of talks around a lot of different coaches. Mike Malone, of course, obviously Dan Hurley was back in the topic, but I think what people don't realize is that Dan Hurley is not leaving UConn like that, and not just necessarily because of his own decision. I also personally think that Dan Hurley coaching in the NBA, I don't think he would be able to do the same things that he does with UConn that he would in the NBA just because of his coaching style. The way that he coaches in UConn and as a college coach is as more of a I wouldn't say strict, but he definitely is a little more forward going and pushing compared to a lot of these other NBA coaches, solely because of the fact that they know that you can't coach especially even a seasoned NBA player. You can't coach an NBA player the same way you would coach a college kid. So, and I
Right.
think Dan Hurley knows that, and I think other organizations know that as well. But so I think Dan Hurley's good where he's at. So I don't think it would have been a great move for him had he gone to the Knicks. But I think Mike Malone is the perfect. I mean, not Mike Malone. Mike Brown is the perfect fit for the Knicks right now. I think it would be a great coach for the Knicks. Like you said, the deep rotation that he runs would be very beneficial for the Knicks. Um, and I'm interested to see, you know, if the team gets any better or if they get worse from having Mike Brown as a coach. We don't really know. He could be the best coach in the league, but at the end of the day, it's the players that are on the court scoring the points. So, you know,
Listen, they
will
have a
it
really good shot.
will work? Yeah.
They
Mhm.
got a good shot. I mean, you have no Tyrese this season, as he was confirmed yesterday that he's going to not play, which we all figured with the torn Achilles. Jason Tatum's going to be
Mhm.
out for next season as well. Your window is open, and that whole process of hiring a coach was just horrible by the Knicks. They tried to interview other teams' coaches, and
Yeah, it
they
was
just got
just like
high
rejection on
rejected.
rejection on rejection on rejection.
Rejection.
It seemed like Jason
It
Kidd was
was
also involved in that.
Kidd was another name, but I didn't expect Dallas to give him up.
Yeah, no.
Ime Udoka was another name. Chris Finch was another name that they also tried
Mhm.
to get. It was just a mess. I mean, they
There was
tried
a,
to
there
do
was
every.
a speculation of Spoelstra, but he's not going anywhere.
Spoelstra, no, Spoelstra's not going anywhere. But
Mhm.
it's just a whole. It was a whole mess, and there were coaches available. Like we said, Mike Brown and Mike Malone were the two open coaches that didn't have a team that were the kind of favorites to get the position. But Mike Brown is, listen, this is a perfect opportunity for him and for the Knicks to make the finals. Like I said, with the injuries, and the East is open. I mean, the Bucks
The
just
East
cut
is
Dame.
open, man.
Dame got cut by the Bucks, so but they did sign Miles Turner. But
Mhm.
they don't have a solid playmaker like Dame
Yeah.
to really open the floor for a guy like Giannis, pick and roll, things like that. The Pacers do not have their star guy. The main guy that got them to the finals is not going to be playing next year. Same thing with the
Mhm.
Celtics. They just traded Porzingis and Drew Holiday, and they don't have Jason Tatum for next season. That's three guys they're going to be missing. So it's going to be
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown mainly going to take over the team. Um, the Pistons should give them trouble. Same thing with the Cavs, but the Cavs just lost Ty Jerome, which is going to be a
Yeah.
big piece that they are going to miss a lot on that bench.
Mhm.
Big scoring presence for the backup guard position, but it's still going to give them troubles regardless.
Mhm.
I would just
Yeah.
say that the Cavs and Pistons are just the two teams that are going to give them trouble.
Mhm.
Maybe the Pacers, they may pull through. You never know
Yeah,
with the
because they
Pacers.
do have they do have other players. They do have other key players, and
They still
obviously
have
with Rick
Pascal.
Carlisle as
That
your
whole
coach, you
roster
always
is
have a
still
chance.
staying. Yeah, the
Yeah.
roster is still gonna stay. You still have Pascal. You still have T.J. McConnell. You
Mhm.
still have Matherin,
Mhm.
A.J. Nemhard.
Yeah, no more. Yeah.
You lost Miles Turner, which that's obviously gonna be a big loss for you. But the team is still going to be the same, almost the same.
Yeah.
But and you still have Rick Carlisle, who's one of the best coaches in basketball, regardless of who
Mhm.
you lose or who you bring in. You're still going to have a guy like him who's going to emphasize shooting the ball, regardless.
Yeah.
Uh, so anything can happen, but the Knicks are definitely right now the favorites to win the NBA, the Eastern Conference. But with how we've seen over the years with the Knicks, they've just always proven that they should be this, and then they just
All right.
proceed to wipe our expectations. Which
Yeah.
I know you're happy about being a Nets fan, but you gotta understand that this is the best time for them.
I just
This
happened to
is
be
the
wearing this
best
out.
time for them
Got that
to
right there
win.
too.
Oh boy, oh boy, look at this guy, a
Yeah,
net.
but I mean, but even the West gets a little bit shaken up too because obviously, Chris Paul just announced not too long ago that he's going to be playing his final season
Oh
of
man,
his NBA career. He's going to be with the Spurs. Obviously, he's been with Spurs like this last season, so that's particularly one that just stings in the heart a little bit. Um, but and I know you as a Rockets fan, of course.
with
I
KD.
am. Yeah, KD. But you know,
The West is gonna be stacked, man.
yeah, the West. I mean, with Cooper Flag, obviously with Dallas, and obviously everything that's been going on with Dallas over the last couple of months, everything from the Luka trade to now where we are here with them. Dallas is gonna. It's gonna be interesting to see how they look this year and how they play out. Kyrie just
If they
signed an
stay healthy,
extension.
who knows if
Kyrie
they
just
can stay
signed.
healthy?
Yeah, Kyrie just signed an extension. It'll probably, in all fairness, it'll probably be his last extension. I think he's he might look to retire after this contract's up, but you
Might
know,
be.
yeah,
You also have the
But
Lakers as well.
yeah,
You also have Luca and LeBron, so that's still going to be a scary duo. The
hmm
Nuggets by far have been one of the bigger winners of the offseason. Now, they
hmm
did trade for Valanciunas, but he is rumored to be he's really interested in going into Europe. As he got a contract offer from them, but the Nuggets are still going to go through with the trade signing of Valanciunas. Uh, but besides that, I mean, they traded for Cam Johnson. You got Tim Hardaway, and you got a plethora of shooters off the bench. Now, your team looks much better, much more healthier than they did the last time uh, when they made it to the playoffs last season. You also have the Spurs. The Spurs have Victor Wembanyama coming back, which
hmm
is going to be a big, big, big factor into the West. Because now that Victor is back, you have the Spurs are going to have a chance at making the finals too, because you still have him, you have De'Aaron Fox, you have Stephon Castle, you have guys
hmm
like Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell.
yeah,
Anything could happen. They could either keep the score and just move on with it, or they could also spark a trade. You never
yeah,
know with the pieces that they have. They have the picks to make the trade, a big trade happen. Possibly Giannis, but
yeah.
he most likely is not going to leave. Uh, Considering that now the market is getting smaller and smaller, but anything can happen at this point.
Yeah,
Uh,
and the Spurs had a great draft too. They the second overall pick they took Dylan Harper, 14th they took Carter Bryant. Summer League kicked off over the weekend.
Summer League's been great.
So yeah, it's gonna be like if they perform well and they end up being key players for the Spurs team, there could be no stopping the Spurs. I mean, obviously,
They
I
have a
believe
future. They have a
yeah,
future, man. They have
Coach Pop
practical.
officially is done. He's retired, which is a little bit of a stinger for the Spurs. Just in a long-standing front, but I think it might be good for the Spurs. We're gonna have to see how they play out, but I would love to see the Spurs be a dominant side again, and I think they have the pieces they need to do it. It's just going to be about can they beat these other dominant powerhouses that are in the West right now.
They can, but anybody can be beaten any day of the week. So it just depends on what pieces come through and what pieces just do not perform and underwhelm. The same thing with the Warriors. Warriors are another team that also are coming back next season with a full season of Jimmy Butler, a full season of Curry with those two guys together. Possibly the young core could mesh into something, or they, like I said, with the Spurs, similar to them, they could be traded. Anything could happen with this team. So the West is just stacked upon stacked. Rockets, the Suns are also going to be in playoff contention. Mavericks, Warriors, Lakers,
Hmm.
Nuggets, Timberwolves, even with Ant coming back. The Thunder is another team that also is going to keep the same core as well. So they're still going to be lingering around, just giving every team fits. Anything could happen next season, and I'm excited to see how the West pulls out. And then with the East, it's just it's it's like a few teams. Mainly the two are the Cavs and the Knicks, but anybody could emerge next season in the Eastern Conference with how open it is. But it should be the Knicks with how they hired Mike Brown, who's now gonna keep not like the same system, but he is more of a still a defensive oriented coach. But he will open up the offense a little bit more, especially with how I said with the rotation. He should open that as well, giving them a little bit more freedom into scoring outside, especially with the work that he had with the Kings. I expect him to replicate that same magic that he had with the Kings with the Knicks.
Yeah, just to lightly touch on that topic of the WNBA, the WNBA announced that over the next couple of years they will be adding expansion teams, which I believe we lightly touched on in the last episode, but just a reminder, adding places like I believe Cleveland is getting a team. The latest expansion team to just be added was San Francisco. Um, a couple of other places are going to be getting ones. Like I think each year they're adding another one. So it'll be good to see the WNBA grow more because the arenas are clearly being evolved. We went from seeing the WNBA teams playing in small G League type arenas to now sharing the NBA arenas of the teams that they play in the same city as, having to share with them. And it's all thanks to, the growing of the market, more teams, bigger name players. Caitlin Clark and herself has been ramping up the league everywhere she goes. These teams who have smaller arenas have to move to bigger arenas. Just a quick headline that I was told about recently. Obviously, for those of you who follow college basketball for the women's, um, Paige Beckers, who played for UConn, was drafted by Dallas. Dallas plays in a smaller arena on a daily basis, but they're playing the Indiana Fever coming up, which is team Caitlin Clark plays for. So we're going to see Paige Beckers versus Caitlin Clark. I've been told that they're moving that game from the small arena that they usually play in to the American Airlines Center where the Mavericks play because they need the bigger capacity. And we're seeing that more and more, not just with games against Caitlin Clark, but just more and more with teams in general. I remember it was just 2 years ago. I went to a WNBA game with the Indiana Fever before Caitlin Clark was there. Um, it was actually, yeah, it was in 2021 actually. I was in Indiana, and we had free time, so we went to a WNBA game. It was the Indiana Fever versus the New York Liberty. Sabrina Ionescu played for the Liberty at the time, but it was in the Indiana Farmers Coliseum, which is a small arena, maybe 10,000 seats, in the middle of a fairground on the outskirts of Indianapolis. This is where the Fever were playing at the time, with virtually no fans, and now all of a sudden they're selling out Gainbridge Fieldhouse, where the Pacers play. They're selling that out on a daily basis, and all these other WNBA teams are doing the same. The Barclays Center, where the Liberty play, always packed out. So it's great to see that the women's sports, not just WNBA basketball, but also women's professional sports in general is growing. I believe a professional softball league was just created, um, for uh, for women's professional sports, and you know it's growing in all fronts,
Or
and
in massive
it's great to
numbers.
see. Yeah, and it's
Or
great to see for young athletes who are looking to make a name for themselves. But this has been a great to work out to try and do. And the fact that we finally been able to do it now is great. And it's a step in the right direction. And, you know, especially in less than a month when I'm going to be back in South Carolina. And we're going to be doing this from states away. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we're going to see how this gets laid out. We're going to look to see what you guys say about it, if you guys like the new format of it. We're going to look to change kind of the format of this actual podcast as well as we move on. Bring on more guests in the future so that it's not just two heads talking about the same stuff every week, you know. And as much as we, you know, like to do that, you know, obviously it's not really, it gets boring after a while, and, you know, you'd look to be a little more entertaining. So look on to maybe bring guests on in the future, and having this platform where we could do it over video helps that. We don't got to bring them into a studio because we didn't have a studio. We just filmed in my basement, which is where I am right now. So, you know, it'll be, just look forward to more content, different type of content, and hopefully this can grow, because that's the only way this can grow, with having different things. But yeah, and I know you would agree with that, Key, and I know we're both looking forward to it. Yes. So this has been episode 5 of the Outsider's View Beyond the Game podcast, presented by the boys. Indeed. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow us on Instagram, social media, at theoutsidersview.btg. Follow us on Spotify. And yeah,
subscribe to the YouTube channel as well.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please watch it on YouTube and just stream it on Spotify. We're looking to get both numbers up. Yeah. I'm telling you, that's the goal. We're gonna get this podcast to the point where we can have a billboard up in Times Square. So
that's the plan, man. That's the plan.
That is the plan. But thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, this has been episode 5. We'll see you guys next week. Ciao for now.